The original portion of the state park was donated to the state of Florida in 1953 by Miss Louise Maclay. It was to be managed as an ornamental garden for public enjoyment as a memorial to her late husband, Alfred Maclay. The adjacent Lake Overstreet property was purchased in 2000 in partnership with the city of Tallahassee, using funds from the preservation and to establish a continuous greenway from the gardens to Lake Jackson, which is you can kind of see here in the map. According to the park's management plan, the designated uses are for public outdoor recreation and conservation. Management and ornamental gardens is the main emphasis of the park, with recreational opportunities being generally passive. In addition to enjoyment of the gardens, recreational opportunities include hiking, biking, horseback riding, and swimming. The Maclay Estate property, which is the original portion of the park, includes the main house, gardens, and outbuildings that were all previously owned by the Maclay family. These structures are associated with landscape features that represent the time period from the late 1800s to the early 20th century. During this time, the Red Hills region, as Tallahassee was called, was seeing a conversion of farms and cotton plantations into winter retreats and quail hunting plantations for wealthy northern industrialists. Alfred Maclay was a banker and a financier from New York, and he established his winter residence here in Tallahassee after visiting his two brother-in-laws that were living here at the time, and that was in 1923. The land surrounding the approximate 28 acres of gardens was used as game plantations with deer stands, roads, trails, and planted food plots throughout, which you would expect for a hunting plantation. The Lake Overstreet addition includes historic home sites and remains of an African American community whose status shifted from enslavement, tenant farming, and sharecropping to land ownership and paid employment. The steep head ravines found on this addition are a rare natural feature in this geographic location, and they provide a microclimate that is home to a large and diverse plant and animal population. Lake Overstreet is located completely within the boundaries of the state park and is one of the last remaining lakes in Leon County without a completely developed shoreline. Prior to state ownership, the Lake Overstreet property had been in single ownership for numerous years, and thus it maintained its undeveloped status despite rapid development of the surrounding urban area. Current interpretation of the park, both online and on-site, focuses primarily on the gardens and the natural environment. The Maclay House and Gardens are the focus of visitation, and the House Museum is usually open to the public from January through April. The house contains family memorabilia and information on the family's history. Currently, the House Museum is undergoing renovation, but in total, there are 82 recorded cultural resources within the current park boundaries, which now includes the Overstreet property. 50 of these are archaeological sites and 31 are associated with existing or former historic buildings. 16 historic buildings are contributing resources to the National Register of Historic Places designation. One of the park goals mentioned in their management plan is to assess and evaluate these resources, many of which have vague location descriptions and little to no above ground evidence. HMS and the ARCHES database have been a valuable tool to document and monitor these resources in a consistent and accountable manner for Maclay Gardens staff and management. And again, huge shout out to Chris because he's done a lot of monitoring at this park. The park management plan discusses the need to link the Maclay House and the complex's outbuildings to stories about the Maclays and the African American community that lived and worked on the estate. Interpretation providing additional context that makes these connections can take place at interpretive kiosks located throughout the trailhead. And these are some kiosks that exist currently at the park. Additionally, the Gilliam Cottage, which currently serves as the FPAN North Central office, can be interpreted to tell the story of the tenant farmers and their association with the Maclay family and the development of the gardens. This interpretation could be extended to tell the story of the tenant farming system that was in place within the larger context of the Red Hills region, so the Tallahassee area. The first step in this process, however, is to get accurate location and condition information for the sites that will form the basis for this interpretation. An archaeological investigation was conducted in 2008 by the Southeast Archaeological Center National Park Service, which was sponsored in part by the Florida Division of Historical Resources. This investigation was designed to assist the park in understanding, managing, and interpreting the resources located around Lake Overstreet associated with the African American community. This project included architectural documentation and condition assessments of the remains of several standing structures, as well as excavation of below surface archaeological remains. The information garnered from the study was intended to be used as a basis for extending interpretation at the park. The resulting detailed report provides a wealth of information that is still very useful today and has been used extensively by park staff for interpretive programming and archival research. Since this survey, several of the structures associated with the Overstreet community have been demolished due to safety concerns, while the remains of others still stand. Even though these structures have either degraded over time or been demolished, the thorough documentation provided by the NPS archaeologists can be used to interpret these sites. The NPS recommended in their report that these components of the site be interpreted as a self-guided tour of the area to be developed. They suggested a brochure that would be used in order to minimize the impact of kiosks along the trail or careful placement of kiosks. Maclay Gardens is in the process of developing interpretive signage that will be placed along the trailhead that leads to the Overstreet community site. But due to the culturally sensitive nature of the content, the text is currently under review by the Florida Park Service, Florida Department of Environmental Protection Communications staff. There has also been a discussion about establishing a new trail that will lead to the ruined remains of the juke joint that was a significant social gathering point for the Overstreet community members. The trail would lead to this site, which would then be interpreted for park visitors. New trails and the placement of interpretive kiosks, of course, necessitates archaeological monitoring. Additionally, the potential increase for foot and bike traffic to the area make it all the more important to have HMS monitoring completed so that there is a baseline data to help staff understand how foot traffic is impacting these sites going forward. While the NPS conducted a thorough archaeological investigation of the site, it has been a while and some elements of the Overstreet community remains have changed or have potentially changed since the 2008 report. Regular monitoring of these sites not only will provide up-to-date information, but could also be a valuable tool in engaging volunteers in the preservation of this history. Maclay Gardens State Park has been the location of the FPAN North Central office since 2019, although we were obviously not there for a lot of it due to the pandemic. FPAN has also made promoting and educating on the basis of inclusion, diversity, and social justice one of our strategic goals. Both park staff and FPAN have met to collaborate on how they can partner to plan events that meet both organizations' goals. During the pandemic, Maclay staff put together a Zoom program adapted from a hiking program about the Overstreet community. This program was based on historical documentation, oral histories, and the documented archaeology at the site. Despite technical difficulties, this program afforded staff a great learning opportunity and showed that there is public interest in this topic. The park has additionally been contacted by the local senior center to organize a hike for their members as well, further emphasizing the fact that there is continued interest in this aspect of the park's history. Interest in this community is not new, however, but perhaps more appropriately referred to as renewed. In 2008, the NPS held a public day as part of their archaeological investigation, and numerous members of the public showed up to learn about the Overstreet community. The history of the Overstreet community does extend beyond the boundaries of the park. A cemetery on private property contains the burials of some of the Overstreet community members, including members of the Gilliam family who occupied the current FPAN office. Another 2 parcels outside the park boundary contain the Lake Hall Schoolhouse, which was the Overstreet community school that children attended. Park staff have been working with these private owners to gather information about these sites as well. Although not on park property, they do contribute to the understanding of the Overstreet community. FPAN staff does plan on reaching out to these landowners to get permission to do some HMS monitoring on these sites. And this can be a great opportunity to garner community involvement and interest in the documentation and preservation of these sites and the Overstreet community as well. Archaeology is a means to tell the story of those not written about in our history books. The story of those members of the Overstreet community is a wonderful example of how archaeology, along with dedicated researchers and volunteers, can make a difference and make more inclusive interpretation of a site possible. HMS monitoring has the ability to ensure that park staff meets their goals of monitoring these sites on a regular basis, ensuring that visitor accessibility and enjoyment is balanced with the security and preservation of the archaeological sites within the park. And of course, huge shout out to Maclay Gardens State Park. And if you're ever in Tallahassee, please stop by and visit us. SEAC, the Division of Historical Resources, the Friends Group of Alfred B. Maclay Gardens State Park, the Memory Project, and of course the City of Tallahassee, of which was largely responsible for the purchase of the Overstreet community property. Thank you.